Let's move to the perhaps more contentious issue, which is the Angel flight, the community service flights.
Community service flights.
And I'm very glad to hear that you're now going to modify the regulations to allow helicopters. Mm-hmm. We did talk about this in our meeting the other day. I still have some difficulties with the regulations, and I just want to work through that
Certainly.
publicly with you. So the regulations seek to change a number of things, and I note these regulations have, in a briefing you provided me, and I think to the committee, stem from two accidents that have taken place, one in Victoria, one in South Australia, Mount Gambier in South Australia.
I'd say they do directly, but the connection between the actual accidents themselves is indirect. But in terms of raising the standard in the sector, there's a direct relationship, if I may.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Because I've read the ATSB report for the Victorian incident, mm-hmm. and of course I can't for the Mount Gambier incident because the ATSB has not finished its work.
It's now in the draft interested parties stage, Senator. So the report has been released to me to look at as an interested party, but I'm not allowed to share the contents, and to Angel Flight.
Sure.
And also to the families of those involved, and there are probably a couple of other interested parties. But it's now in a phase of, I think it's 6 weeks of discussion before they finalise their report.
Okay. So in both, just going through the regulations as you are changing them. So one of the changes you're placing upon pilots who may participate in this is a minimum number of hours. I think it's 400 hours experience and 200 in command.
250 in command.
250 command.
400 hours minimum, unless you hold a commercial pilot's licence or an air transport pilot's licence, which you can get in less hours, but which is a much more structured training program to get you to that point. Okay. So it's the 400 hours tends to relate more to private pilots. Private flying, which is an experiential base, but not as much a structured training course.
But I note that those requirements are firstly not related to either of the accidents that have taken place. In both of those cases, those pilots had substantially more experience than the 250-hour minimum requirement you've placed in this regulation.
The 400. I'm not sure on the first accident, Senator. I'd have to go back and have a look. The second accident, which is still subject to the investigation, I think the pilot had just over 530 hours.
Yeah.
So more. 400 is less than that, but it is, for us, it's a question of experience, and that's where the 500 comes in. And if I may make a point, if I look across at the Angel Flight organisations across the world, if I look at the 7 Angel Flight organisations in the United States, for example, because I'm often encouraged to harmonise my regulations with the FAA. If I look at the Angel Flight organisations, a number of those are at 500 hours. Mm-hmm. They're nearly all at instrument flying. So they are nearly all much higher than the standards we're imposing here. So we're just lifting that minimum threshold.
Okay, because I'm looking at the pilot affirmation required for Angel Flight, and they say you must have at least 250 hours logged as a pilot in command.
Depends on which one, Senator. I've got which Angel Flight is that? It's beyond the top of the sheet probably, because Angel Flight Mid-Atlantic is 500.
I'm talking about the Australian operation.
Oh, the Australian is 250.
Yeah.
I was talking about the American one, so we're talking cross purposes.
Sure.
But I suppose what I'm saying is, the point I was making, I think, or endeavouring to make, is that the minimum standard in Angel Flight elsewhere is much higher, voluntarily is much higher than the minimum standard that Angel Flight sets here in Australia. And we consider that pilot experience is a relevant factor. Most Angel Flight pilots have much more experience than 500 hours.
Sure.
So all we're doing is increasing the experience level at the bottom end.
Well, in actual fact, I think what you're doing is placing a minimum that I actually don't think will affect their operations, to be quite honest.
Nor do I. I think it would be so minor. I really just don't see how it would affect them.
So in that area, I don't have a problem. As you know, the other day I had a big problem with the helicopters. That leaves us moving to things like night VFR.
Yep.
So the general principle is I, as a person, can jump into Senator Brockman's plane. I think you've got a licence, haven't you?
No, I did some pilot training, but I never got my licence.
All right, well, I'm not going to jump into his plane then, but we can jump into mine. I can jump in as a regular person into an aircraft with a pilot with a certain level of comfort that this person knows how to fly, because CASA would not have given them a licence unless they were able to, and that includes for night VFR. So there's, these pilots if you're trained for night VFR, I'm trying to understand the distinction between a person who just a regular person and someone who might be an Angel Flight passenger. And just for the record, just for the chair and others who may be listening, Angel Flight is and these community service flights are used in circumstances where someone in a remote area, regional area, unfortunately finds out they've got cancer and needs some treatment and chemo, and that has to be done in my state in Adelaide, and it can be quite a burden to go from Ceduna to Adelaide multiple times, and so these pilots volunteer, pay their way, and Angel Flight provides a level of regulation, if you like, or not in the CASA sense, and also contributes to the cost of the fuel.
I think, just to clarify, I think Angel Flight brokers the activity, coordinates it. It has some rules around that.
Yeah.
Very minimal though, in comparison to, for example, the other community service flight operator, Little Wings, which operates as if it is an aircraft operator, operates as if it holds an air operator certificate. So it has systems in place and it has appointed people to manage that, whereas Angel Flight's view is that it brokers the activity and no more. So it does connect the patient or the passenger with a volunteer pilot, but not extensively more than that.
And in that sense, the nature of the discussion is, if these regulations come into force and, in this case, might exclude someone who would normally be able to fly me from Ceduna to Adelaide night VFR, but under the new regulations would exclude a friend of mine who's got cancer from jumping into the same aircraft and making the same trip.
I think I understand the point that you're making. I do think that Angel Flight indicates that they've got, I think, about 3,000 pilots on their books, give or take. They do reimburse the cost of fuel, and anecdotally, if not more than anecdotally, people fly with Angel Flight as much for the good that they're doing as it is for someone paying for their hours.
Yeah.
And there are always there are lots of pilots, if you like, competing for jobs, if I can put it that way, when a job comes up. So I'd argue that there would be, in the majority of circumstances, pilots around. I think the night VFR connection relates to the first accident too, which is the accident in Nil, in Victoria, which was 2011, I think, where it was essentially an accident under night visual flight rules. I understand the pilot was qualified to fly night VFR, but night VFR is a risky activity, and what we're really endeavouring to do here, if I may, is to reduce the risk. And if I link back to what I said before, we spent a lot of time working with Angel Flight over the last 18 months to encourage them to voluntarily do what some of the other Angel Flights are doing, to raise their standards, voluntarily push them up, because we think there is risk, and unfortunately we were not successful.
Yeah, look, in some sense I don't really want to go to Angel Flight. I'm just trying to understand. You've got someone who is qualified to fly night VFR. I can go to that person and say to that person in a private nature, there's two of us in the plane, how about we split the cost of this journey? I believe that's lawful. So I can pitch in for the fuel, pitch in for some of the maintenance costs, pitch in for whatever other costs might be involved in the flight, and that's fine. So, Senator Patrick goes off on his flight, but my colleague who's ill, same pilot, same aircraft. In this instance, someone is paying for assisting with the cost of the fuel, can't. And I just wonder how you differentiate between, I'm probably less valuable than that person, but between two people in exactly the same circumstances from a safety perspective.
Okay. Well, it's... the safety perspective.
You're kind of arguing duty of care perspective.
Certainly duty of care. Certainly knowing that there are opportunities. I mean, that last accident case, the drift into night VFR, I think, was a consequence of late appointments and what have you. So it was and sometimes this happens in. The community service flight sector, where someone's flying into the city for an appointment, the appointment gets delayed, something happens, and then they're under pressure to get back. And in this case, I think it was a drift into night VFR, but it ran out of time. What we're trying to do is, and the pilot would be saying, well, I'm still qualified, so I'll fly in night VFR. I've been flying all day, but I'll keep on flying. We're looking for human factors, decision making, to say maybe I shouldn't fly night VFR. But
that doesn't vary from person A to person B.
It does, in the sense that you know your mate. So you've done a deal with your mate. You know your mate's appetite.
That doesn't tell me anything about his flight qualifications.
Well, but you do know his appetite for risk.
I'd like to table the sort of documentation, which is the Angel flight request documentation, if that's okay.
It's also really an issue that suddenly. Senator, suddenly the flight has become more complex, significantly more complex than it was planned to be, and you've got ill passengers in the back. You've got people
they're
who are
not ill passengers.
Well, they very often are, Senator. They're not being treated, but in that sense.
I think Senator Patrick does make a very good point, though, that in terms of the safety profile, I'm not convinced you've made.
I'll ask one of my colleagues to